right? So your assignment 1 is due Wednesday, February the 17th, and your exam 1 is Friday, February the 19th. So the exam will be during the class time, so you can take it either here or at your home or anywhere else, but you have to do it individually. You can't work together. And also you will need to use the lockdown browser. Emily will try to figure that out. If she can't, I'm gonna ask the IT to help us to do that. And you can access that through eCampus. It's also on the exam 1 folder. Again, there's no makeup, so make sure you do the exam on time. Also, please remind me if you need ADA accommodation. Kind of forgot, so if you could remind me before quiz or exam, that would be great. Okay. Another announcement is about attendance. So make sure you remember to mark your attendance. Before this semester, usually there's no makeup. So if you miss that day, you didn't mark your attendance, I don't have the time to go back and find your name and mark it. But this semester, I'm asking Emily for help to mark attendance for me. So I don't know what you think. Do you think we should?
What I'm doing is I'm keeping track of names, and if it's like a common occurrence,
Uh-huh.
I'll do it like one time and like once after.
Okay.
Because it's like a responsibility.
Yeah. So yeah, because this is on the syllabus. There's no makeup if you miss the attendance. If you miss a quiz, you just can't make it up. Since Emily is in charge this semester, I'm gonna let her make the decision. So she will be tracking the names. If you keep forgetting, I don't think she will keep helping you to go back and mark your attendance. So make sure you remember to do that. Same with quizzes and exams. So far, I think most of you have been on top of that. So keep doing that. Keep submitting everything on time. All right. Any questions regarding the due date and the exam? If we have time, I might talk about the exam format next week. So basically, it's all multiple choice, but if we have time, I will give you more details on that. So for today, we are going to finish central nervous system, hopefully. I don't know if we can finish that, but we will talk about the spinal cord and the brain, including different areas of the brain. Okay, so last time we finished peripheral nervous system. I don't know if you have any questions on that before we move to the central nervous system. We good? All right. Okay, so in the central nervous system, we have the spinal cord. That's the pathway connecting the brain and the peripheral nervous system. And there are two types of neurons in the spinal cord. First, we have the sensory neurons. It's also called afferent neurons. So they carry signals from senses to the central nervous system. So senses, meaning your smell, your eyesight, your hearing, your touches. And then we have the motor neurons. This is called the afferent neurons. And they carry signals away from your central nervous system to your muscles. Also, make sure you cover your face with your mask in the classroom. So you need to remember sensory and motor, and you need to know one is afferent or afferent. English is kind of complicated, in my opinion. Why would you make them so similar? It's your guys' fault.
Those are just other names for like sensory motor, right?
Yes. So make sure you know that if you see them on the exams, maybe I will use afferent, maybe I will use sensory, so make sure you know. Okay. So your spinal cord, they govern basic muscle reflexes. Sometimes we also call them the reflex arc, and they don't need the brain. Can you think of a reason why they don't need the brain to process your reflexes? Yes, go ahead.
It's because your brain can be too slow sometimes to process that information.
Okay, why would you want it to be fast?
Because if you say like touch a hot stove, you don't want to have to think about moving your hand away. You want to have the reflex to just move it really quickly.
Yes, very good. So have you had that feeling that you're about to fall over, or you touch a stove and you just like have that reflex on your own? You don't think about it. You don't think about, oh, that's dangerous, right? So those are reflexes. Let me give you the definition of reflexes. So those are quick involuntary muscle responses based on information without instruction from the brain. Okay, so that's exactly why they don't involve the brain when you have reflexes, because you can make faster reactions. Okay. So for the spinal cord, we have 31 segments in total. The damage at a given segment leaves a person without sensation or motor control in all areas of the body below that segment. So let's say you have damage on the T1 segment. You're very likely to lose all the controls beneath that. So like your chest muscle, your abdominal muscles, your leg muscles, bowel, bladder, sexual functions, you lose all that control. If you have like a C1 damage, you're pretty much paralyzed below the body. You heard of those cases, right? Someone get into an accident, they're paralyzed maybe below the neck, below the abs, or below the legs. It's because they have damage at a certain segment on their spinal cord. You don't need to remember the names or what they are, just know this is what happens when you have damages on your spinal cord. Okay? Okay, the brain. So they interpret and store information for us. They send orders to muscles, glands, and organs. And this is the most complex part of our nervous system. And it allows the richest information processing. So we talked about our nervous system receives inputs and then process inputs and generates outputs, right? So the brain has the most complex information processing. So some fun facts about the brain. You don't need to memorize this for the exam, just some fun facts. So the brain weighs 3 pounds in cerebral spinal fluid, but it only weighs 3 ounces when it's dry. So most of them are fluid. A lot of fluids can help you protect the brain. So when you have any contact to the brain, your brain doesn't really hit the skull too hard. Right? So 80% of human brain is cortex. So cortex is the most superficial of the organ. So that's the surface of the brain. And cortex is absent in fish, reptiles, and birds. Only 1/3 of the brain cortex is visible. And if spread out flat, our cortex is about the size of a sheet of newspaper, so it's about 4 pages of the regular textbook. It's pretty big. Okay. All right, now I'm gonna give you some statements, and you tell me whether it's a myth or a fact. So you only use 10% of your brain. Do you think it's a myth? Raise your hand. Some. Do you think it's a fact? Some. Okay. What about like 20, 30%? Do you think? Have you heard of those? You only use part of your brain. Do you think that's a fact? Okay, so more people think it's not just 10%, maybe not the full capacity of your brain. So that's actually a myth. So it's just very hard to prove it. But scientists believe that we use the whole capacity of the brain. It's just very hard to prove. Okay, listening to Mozart makes you smarter. Do you think that's a myth? Okay, some people think that's a fact. Okay, only 2. So that's actually true. Listening to music changes your brain functions or your brain structures. That's why musicians, their brain reacts stimulus different from normal people. That's why we encourage people to learn instruments or listen to music when they're young, when their brains are still developing. When you get older, your brain are less flexible, they're less likely to make changes according to those stimulation. So yeah, listen to music. Learn to play some instruments. It's good for you. Don't listen to music while you do your homework though. Don't multitask. We will talk about that later, but don't multitask. Some people like to listen to music when they do their homework. They think they focus more. That's a myth. That's all in your head. Okay, so brain damage is permanent. Myth or facts? Myth? Okay, a lot of you. Facts? Oh, okay. About half and half. So that's really depends. Very good. So your brain can adapt to certain damages. So let's say some people, they become blind after an accident. Their brain might adapt to that to make your auditory ability better. You heard of those examples, right? You hear better after you lose your sight, or you smell better, I don't know. So your brain actually can make adjustments based on certain damages. But some damage could be permanent. Your brain cannot repair that. Okay, next. Drinking alcohol kills brain cells. Myth? Facts? So all of you. Is it because I told you that drinking is not good for you? Or you knew this all along? Which one? Oh, both? Okay, so moderate drinking actually don't kill your brain cells. If you just drink a little bit, it does not affect your brain too much. However, if you drink too much, it damages the brain. So don't, yeah.
Like, how much is too much?
How much too much? It actually depends. When you black out, that's when your brain starts to get damaged and you can't remember anything. And alcohol tolerance is different from each person. Yes?
What is causing the damage? Because I can't imagine like GABA agonists would make it so that, like.
What's causing the damage?
Yeah.
Is that what you asked?
I mean, is it specifically the alcohol in it, or is it like the different stimulants?
I actually don't know. So I don't know how that exactly work. Like, how does a drug work in your brain? Sometimes I don't really know that. But it would be interesting if you know. Does anyone know that?
There's like this website that you can go to. I forgot what it's called, but it's like it does like trials on mice and stuff, and it's like
Yep.
what different drugs like do to your brain and stuff. Like
Actually, I will show you that later when we talk about drugs. But it doesn't tell you like how exactly affect the brain. Like, I think you're asking how does it work, right?
Yeah, like what specific chemical process is like damaging things?
Not sure. That's very specific. Maybe if you're interested in it, you can do some research and let us know. All right. Next, we have this: humans have the biggest brains because we're the smartest. Myth? Fact? What about ratio to the body? Do we have the largest ratio to the body?
I would say yeah.
Yeah? Okay, that's a myth too. So we don't have the biggest brain, not even the ratio to the body. All right. Any questions before we go into the location of the brain? Nope. All right. So brain, we're gonna talk about hindbrain, midbrain, and forebrain. It's a lot of information, so be prepared. First, we have the hindbrain. This is the most ancient and basic brain structures. At least that's what scientists believe. And there are three major structures. We have medulla, which is here. We have cerebellum, right here. And we have the pons, which is right here. Again, you don't need to memorize the location. I'm not going to ask you to identify, okay, what's this? This is cerebellum. I'm not going to ask you that. However, you need to know the function of each part of the brain. So first, medulla, that controls our basic vital functions, including respiration, heart rates, breathing, blood pressure. That's when we feel lightheaded when we get up. That's because your blood pressure didn't get high enough. So any damage to the medulla can be fatal because they control those very vital functions. Once you lose that control, you can't control your heartbeat, your breathing, you're very likely to die. Okay, so that's medulla. Next, we have cerebellum. They control our fine coordinated movement or well-rehearsed movements. We also call cerebellum the little brain. And they can be affected by alcohol or stroke, which cause poor coordination, balance, and slurred speech. And you see that when you see someone get drunk, right? Yes, Stephen?
So with like slurred speech, does that mean that the cerebellum controls parts of speech?
Yes. So we can only say that they are correlated.
Okay.
It's very hard to say which part of brain controls what because sometimes they overlaps. We can only say that there's correlation between them or there's relationship between them. Okay, good question though. All right, next I'm going to show you a video when your cerebellum is affected by alcohol. However, the video contains very strong language. If you don't want to listen to that, cover your ears. All right.
Joining me today is Mozza. Welcome to the bottle shop.
Yeah, cheers, Oz. Nothing. Wait a minute, there's a fucking zombie.
No, that's just a drunken member of society.
Could be a zombie.
No, he's as full as a doctor's wallet.
Oh, the zombie's having a crack at the fridge. Come on, fridge. Fridge says not today, dickhead. He falls on the corn chips.
Oh, he's looking to turn this around fast, though. He regains his balance. He puts one leg in front of the other. Now he's reaching for the door handle.
Oh, he's fucking done it!
The door is open.
Oh, poor fridge has been compromised, though. It's going to get infected. It can't run away because it's a fridge.
Mate, seriously, he's after a beer. See, he's off his titties.
I didn't know zombies could get drunk.
He's a human that's fucking maggoted.
Oh, righto.
Fuck's sake. Now let's see if he makes it over to the counter. Oh no, he's lost his way again.
It's not the way.
This is no
it's
good.
not the way. Oh, he's fucking stacked it.
Man down!
Man down!
Man down!
I'm on his side now. I want to see him get through this. A legless man should always be able to get more legless. It's what the Anzacs fought for.
Yes, come on, mate. You can do this. Kick with your little legs.
Oh, I think the problem is his head. The whole skull brain area is throwing him off balance.
Yeah, you're not wrong. Heads are a fucking burden.
They are heavy as.
Oh, now he's reaching for the fridge handle.
That's smart. That's very smart. He can MacGyver his way out of this yet.
Come on, mate. Kick. Use your swimming skills. Think of Thorpe.
Think of bloody Phelpsy winning gold while smoking all that reefer.
Oh, no, he's tucking himself out.
Oh, yeah, it was a big swim with no water. That'll fuck you up.
Yeah, oh shit, mate, it's Uncle Terry.
A fucking code red, evac, fucking abort. Just bloody leg it, mate.
No, Moz, it's all good. He's gonna use his stealth. Stay nice and low. fly under the radar.
Oh, no,
shit.
that's too low.
Too low.
That's far too low. Oh, Uncle Terry is peering over the fence like Wilson in Home Improvement.
Yeah, he's asking the wanker if he's alright. He's like, yeah, I'm fucking golden.
Uncle Terry won't let this go. He's summoning a posse. He says, oi, Chuck, oi, Daz, come and look at this.
Fuck, the last thing our protagonist needs is sober people with their judgy eyes.
Oh, no, they're backing off.
Oh, they're giving him space to work.
This is his moment.
He's got one shot, one opportunity.
Mum spaghetti is it. You don't
No.
need it. No, just let it's a trap.
It was a trap, mate. Yeah,
It
this
goes
is absolutely...
on for a long time, but you get the idea. Your movement gets affected, your balance gets affected. That's why you definitely should not drink and drive.
Blimey.
Hmm?
Blimey.
Blimey?
Blimey. Because it's British.
Oh, I think it's Australia.
Australian,
Yeah.
Close.
So
British
this is
Texas.
from the Aussie Man review. If you want to check that out, it's pretty interesting. Right, next we have the pons. That's the bridge between the brain and the spinal cord. It connects the medulla to the cerebellum. Oh no, cerebrum. And we're going to talk about cerebrum. That's different from cerebellum. Okay, so they transfer information to and from the central nervous system. That's why we call it a bridge. This regulates your sleep, dreaming, and arousal. Questions on the pons? Good. All right. So practice question. As Jake jumps to his feet to cheer on the A&M basketball team, he suddenly feels lightheaded. What part of his brain didn't increase his blood pressure fast enough? D. Okay, pretty good. Medulla, so that's blood pressure, vital function. It's mostly memorization. So. Okay, next we are going to talk about the midbrain. So this is the smallest of the three brains, so midbrain, hindbrain, and forebrain. This also involves in your basic functions. For example, your reticular formation. This is located throughout the brainstem. And I'm going to tell you what this brainstem is. So this regulates your wakefulness and sleep, your arousal and tension. That's reticular formation. Right. Next, in the midbrain, we have, so the midbrain also integrates movement in with sensory input. So we have substantia nigra and striatum. They involve in smooth movement, so very fine-tuned movement, like playing pianos or playing guitars. Yes?
Would this like portion of the brain could be also the reason like some people get motion sickness? Or is that a different part?
Motion sickness?
Yeah.
Like in the car they get...
Well, like just like people get motion sickness like on roller coasters, airplanes, the car, boats, stuff like that.
I don't think it's this one. That's more, I think it's more about the balance, so cerebellum. So substantia nigra in Latin, it means black substance. So for people with Parkinson's syndrome, it's because their cells die in their substantia nigra, so their dopamine decreases. And you can see for those fine-tuned movements, like picking up a spoon and feed yourself, people with Parkinson's, they can't really do it because they can't control those movements. Does that make sense? All right, very good. So the brainstem is your midbrain plus hindbrain without the cerebellum. And that's the brainstem. I don't think I have a questions regarding this on the exam. It's just for your own information. When I talk about brainstem, what does that stand for? Right. The forebrain, this is the largest brain region. And there are two major components. First is the limbic system, and second is the cerebral cortex, or they call it the cerebrum. So for the limbic system, it integrates emotion and memory. It includes the following structures. First, the amygdala. In Latin, it means almond because it has an almond shape. They control your emotional expression and recognition. So when people are happy, you can recognize that emotion. And we think it's because of your amygdala. The amygdala also helps us learn to associate objects with emotional responses, especially fear. So it's kind of like learning, but more focused on emotional side. So if people have damage on their amygdala, they might not know to fear something. Right? They could be very fearless. Right. Next in the limbic system, we have hippocampus, and that means seahorse in Latin word. So they control the formation of new episodic memories.
What's the
Episodic memory?
yeah.
So I asked you, what did you do at a certain period of time? That's an episode of your memory, so that's episodic memory.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we also have other different memories, but we'll talk about that later in future chapters. They also control your spatial navigation, so how to navigate around campus, know the map, directions. And general memory, I'm going to show you a clip which is talking about patient HM. So make sure you know about the case and what's going on with this patient.
On September 1st, 1953, William Scoville used a hand crank and a cheap drill saw to bore into a young man's skull, cutting away vital pieces of his brain and sucking them out through a metal tube. But this wasn't a scene from a horror film or a gruesome police report. Dr. Scoville was one of the most renowned neurosurgeons of his time, and the young man was Henry Molaison, the famous patient known as HM, whose case provided amazing insights into how our brains work. As a boy, Henry had cracked his skull in an accident and soon began having seizures, blacking out, and losing control of bodily functions. After enduring years of frequent episodes and even dropping out of high school, the desperate young man had turned to Dr. Scoville, a daredevil known for risky surgeries. Partial lobotomies had been used for decades to treat mental patients, based on the notion that mental functions were strictly localized to corresponding brain areas. Having successfully used them to reduce seizures in psychotics, Scoville decided to remove HM's hippocampus, a part of the limbic system that was associated with emotion, but whose function was unknown. At first glance, the operation had succeeded. HM's seizures virtually disappeared, with no change in personality, and his IQ even improved. But there was one problem. His memory was shot. Besides losing most of his memories from the previous decade, HM was unable to form new ones, forgetting what day it was, repeating comments, and even eating multiple meals in a row. When Scoville informed another expert, Wilder Penfield, of the results, he sent a PhD student named Brenda Milner to study HM at his parents' home, where he now spent his days doing odd chores and watching classic movies for the first time, over and over. What she discovered through a series of tests and interviews didn't just contribute greatly to the study of memory. It redefined what memory even meant. One of Milner's findings shed light on the obvious fact that although HM couldn't form new memories, he still retained information long enough from moment to finish a sentence or find the bathroom. When Milner gave him a random number, He managed to remember it for 15 minutes by repeating it to himself constantly. But only 5 minutes later, he forgot the test had even taken place. Neuroscientists had thought of memory as monolithic, all of it essentially the same and stored throughout the brain. Milner's results were not only the first clue for the now familiar distinction between short-term and long-term memory, but showed that each uses different brain regions. We now know that memory formation involves several steps. After immediate sensory data is temporarily transcribed by neurons in the cortex, it travels to the hippocampus, where special proteins work to strengthen the cortical synaptic connections. If the experience was strong enough, or we recall it periodically in the first few days, the hippocampus then transfers the memory back to the cortex for permanent storage. HM's mind could form the initial impressions, but without a hippocampus to perform this memory consolidation, they eroded like messages scrawled in sand. But this was not the only memory distinction Milner found. In a now famous experiment, she asked HM to trace a third star in the narrow space between the outlines of two concentric ones, while he could only see his paper and pencil through a mirror. Like anyone else performing such an awkward task for the first time, he did horribly. But surprisingly, he improved over repeated trials, even though he had no memory of previous attempts. His unconscious motor centers remembered what the conscious mind had forgotten. What Milner had discovered was that the declarative memory of names, dates, and facts is different from the procedural memory of riding a bicycle or signing your name. And we now know that procedural memory relies more on the basal ganglia and cerebellum, structures that were intact in HM's brain. This distinction between knowing that and knowing how has underpinned all memory research since. HM died at the age of 82 after a mostly peaceful life in a nursing home. Over the years, he had been examined by more than 100 neuroscientists, making his the most studied mind in history. Upon his death, his brain was preserved and scanned before being cut into over 2,000 individual slices and photographed to form a digital map down to the level of individual neurons, all in a live broadcast watched by 400,000 people. Though HM spent most of his life forgetting things, he and his contributions to our understanding of memory will be remembered for generations to come.
Right, so that's patient HM. Any questions on the video? Good? Okay. So in the limbic system, next we have the cingulate cortex. That's related to our attention and our cognitive control. So cognitive control is the ability to focus on information that is currently relevant to a particular goal while inhibiting information that is not relevant. So that's basically attention, whether you can focus or not. Next, we have thalamus in the limbic system. This is the relay center. So they receive information from your senses and relate to your cerebral cortex, including sight, touch, hearing, and taste, but not smell. One theory or hypothesis is that they think smell is more ancient than all the other senses, so it has a direct route to the cerebral cortex. It doesn't need to go through the relay center, which is the thalamus. So that's the thalamus. Next, we have hypothalamus. So I think hypo means underneath, so underneath the thalamus. So this controls our drives and motives, so such as hunger, thirst, aggression, lust, and etc. They also control the autonomic nervous system, which is the 4 F's. Fighting, fleeing, feeding, and meeting. You also control your hormone secretion, as well as your body temperature. Okay. All right, so that was the limbic system. Let's do a question together. Which of the following message would not come from the hypothalamus? Remember, it controls the 4 F's.
See?
C.
Do you guys agree? Okay, so what would fear be associated with?
Hippo.
Almond?
The almond one?
Almond?
What is it? Yes, amygdala. All right, very good. All right. It takes some time for you to remember. Don't worry, you can remember that now. All right. Questions so far? Okay. All right, next, let's talk about cerebral cortex, which is also called cerebrum, which sounds very similar to cerebellum. It's very confusing. So this is part of the forebrain, and it's considered the newest part of the brain. And it is involved in the complex brain process, such as thinking and planning. Okay, that's cortex. For our cerebral cortex, they can be separated into 3 functional areas: sensory, motor, and association, or they can be separated into 4 anatomical areas, which is called the frontal lobe, temporal lobe, parietal lobe, and occipital lobe. So those are the anatomical areas. First, we're going to talk about the functional areas. So in the sensory cortex, we have visual cortex, which is in the occipital lobe, and it controls or it processes our visual information. Then we have the auditory cortex. This is in your temporal lobe, and it processes the sound. Lastly, in the sensory cortex, we have somatosensory cortex, and this is in the parietal lobe. It controls our touch, pain, and temperature. Yes?
Do we have to know the specific lobes, or just knowing that the cortex has the like doing different parts and which one they are?
It will help because the temporal lobe has auditory cortex. And in the next couple slides, I'm going to introduce those different lobes. It will help if you know where they are and what does it do. But I would not ask you, where is the auditory cortex? Where is the visual cortex? Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So in the motor cortex, this is in our frontal lobe, and it's responsible for voluntary movement. In this graph, larger areas indicates more sensory neurons in that area. So you see a big hand here, so we have a lot of sensory neurons on our hand. A little bit on our body, legs and feet. That's why our hands are more sensible than others. We have tongues, swallowing. So if part of the cortex is stimulated during surgery, that same part of the body will respond on the person physically. So let's say the physician accidentally touched this area of your brain, your hand will respond. This is another graph to help you remember the motor cortex. It's creepy, very creepy, but it kind of visualize the motor cortex controls like very hugely on hands, your tongue, your face, etc. Right. Next, in the functional areas, we have the association cortex. This controls our complex cognitive tasks, and they combine information from more than one area. That's why it's called association cortex. Okay, so that's the 3 functional areas. Next, we are going to talk about anatomical areas. First, we have the frontal lobe, which is in the front. They involve in attention, working memory, so means that you can remember things in mind while solving a problem. It's a little bit different from short-term memory, but it's similar, so you can store that information for a short period of time.
So it's like that's in the video they were talking about, like he was able to like remember like words when he was speaking, but then like a couple minutes later he couldn't.
Yeah, so he cannot form short-term memory. Yep, but he still has some part of the working memory. Also, frontal lobe is responding our planning, abstract thinking, controlling impulses, our creativity, social awareness, and this is the home of motor cortex, which is processing your voluntary motor messages, as we just discussed. So that's why I say it helps if you know where the cortex is, and then you can make association, like what they control. Okay, do you remember frontal lobe? Like, which case did we discuss frontal lobe in this class? Vince Gage, remember that guy?
Oh, with the guy with the hole through his head.
Yeah, so about social awareness, controlling impulses. Remember, we talked about his personality change. He became very like violent. Okay, so here, so his frontal lobe is damaged, which caused major changes in his impulse control and social awareness. That was Vince Gage. I think that also kind of helped you remember the frontal lobe controls what. At least that's what happened to me in undergrad. That's how I remember it. Oh, another tip is for hippocampus. I remember campus is like where you form memories, like your college memories. That's how I remember it. And we're gonna talk about how to learn things, like different types of ways to memorize later on when we talk about memories. It's a lot of information, right? The good thing is our exams are not cumulative, so you only need to remember this for this exam. After this, if you don't remember, if you forget, that's fine. It won't show up on the later exams. Okay. Next, we have the temporal lobe, which is right here. So they are controlling our important meaningful speech and language comprehension. They process auditory information from the ears. So it goes in from here. I think that's why they call it the temporal lobe. And it's where the auditory cortex is. Next, we have the occipital lobe. That's where the visual cortex is. It processes visual information from the eyes. And the way I remember it is, it kind of looks like yeah. So you identify and make sense of visual information. So that's occipital lobe. Your optic nerve travels from the eye to the thalamus. Again, that's the relay center. And then to the occipital lobes, and specifically the visual cortex. Then we have the parietal lobe. That's important for our sensation and perception of touch. And this is the home of sensory cortex, which processes sensory information. Okay. So that's it. I know it's a lot of information, but spend some time to read them through and then quiz each other. That will help you remember things better. Yeah, that's it. Unless you have any questions, I'll see you on Friday.